The Story of Christmas by Manly P. Hall. This is part 3. For the full online text version of this book, as well as the previous videos in this playlist, you can find them both linked in the description box below. Also, please remember to like, share, and comment. Originally, the Christ Mass was almost completely religious within the body of Christendom. It combined several sacred occasions, including Epiphany, a feast that was celebrated on January 6th, commemorating the coming of the three Magi to the crib of Christ, or as it is said, the first manifestation of Christ to the Gentiles. In the 4th century, the marriage feast of Cana and the feeding of the multitudes with fishes and barley loaves were included in the Christmas festivities. The broad form of Christmas, as we now know it, seems to have originated in Western Europe, but spread rapidly eastward, and then in the middle years of the 4th century was observed in the Byzantium at the court of Constantius. It was not the Mass in the church or the cathedral which first and most completely expressed the Christmas spirit. This true festival came directly into the lives of all concerned. It was an intimate religious experience, a sacrament in the home, by the fireside, and most of all, within the human heart. It was dedicated to the memory of a little child who was to become the undisputed ruler of the human heart. This child, born in a stable, surrounded by animals, was not a temporal sovereign crowned and sceptered, for his kingdom was not of this world. He was the rule of love. He was the Prince of Peace. Even the poor and the illiterate could understand the life way of the gentle Nazarene. They tried to restore his spirit in themselves by doing his works, and by honoring his memory through acts of Christian charity. They celebrated Christmas in memory of him, and in the way that they believed that he would have wished. They remembered his teachings, and that if a man would love his God, he should love his brother also. It was the original intent that during the Christmas season, love should rule the world, in anticipation of the day when the Lord of Love should return to his kingdom and rule over all men in spirit and in truth. The attitudes of the medieval man were largely influenced by his environment. His personal opportunities were limited. His requirements were few and simple, and he was subjected to a variety of misfortunes, natural or man-made. As might be expected under such conditions, he devised his own amusements and took advantage of every possible opportunity for gaiety as well as celebration. His manners were rude, and many of his customs would seem offensive to us. He was devoutly religious, and he turned to his faith for security because he had no concept of improving the conditions under which he lived. It is notable that medieval man had not yet awakened to the idea that he would help to build a better world for himself and others. He certainly possessed humanitarian instincts and the rudiments of social consciousness, and he revealed these instincts most strongly and clearly through his celebration of Christmas. Gradually, he came to identify this festival with the emotion of hope. The birth of Christ meant to him the assurance of the ultimate well-being, if not in this world, then in a better place beyond death. He rested his hope in God, for he had little faith in his fellow men, and even less in himself. Yet, for him the Heavenly Father had sent his Son into the world in the likeness of a mortal person. Through this wonderful intercession, The gates of salvation had been opened, and the lonely, the tired, the sick, and the poor were not forgotten. We know that even today sorrow and adversity incline us to seek the consolation of the Spirit. The Middle Ages of the European history were burdened with war, with plague, drought, and famine. The individual could not cope with these vast problems. He could only accept them and turn to his faith for strength. Under such conditions, the natural mysticism in the human soul found its fullest expression. And with this came the rise of Christian mysticism and the gradual identification of the Christ story with the changes wrought within the human soul by piety and devotion. All this led in due time to the firm belief that there was a divine power within man, which was the very presence of God. The coming of Christ was reenacted in the life of each individual who chose to live according to the spirit of the Master's teachings. At Christmas, there was not only the beautiful tradition of a child born in Bethlehem, but the timeless symbolism of eternal truth born in the heart of men. This was understandable even in the days when men's minds were scarcely touched by the philosophical insight. We should also remember that during these long, dark centuries, men still lived in a world which belonged essentially and factually to God. The individual did not feel that peculiar reverence for human achievement which has developed within the last 100 years. Today, in our emergencies, we turn to institutions fashioned by our own ingenuity. We are dazzled by our own ability and powers, and have gained a false sense of self-sufficiency. The way of heaven appears to us remote and incomprehensible. Probably it is good that we have learned to solve many of our own problems, but most of these solutions pertain only to the physical comforts and securities. If medieval man was too small to meet his own needs, modern man has grown so large that he has forgotten his own basic requirements. Every day he is faced with uncertainties and troubles, but he blunders along, trying to solve with his mind critical situations which demand a greater essential enlightenment than he actually possesses. It is nice to feel that we have conquered the primordial darkness with an electric light, or overcome its isolation with the automobile, the telephone, and the airplane. Yet none of these can actually bridge the interval between human souls. The old loneliness still lingers, and when we think beyond and through our numerous commendable achievements, we must finally come to realize that the human being is still a citizen of vast space. The heavens roll above him, and the earth must sustain his empire. The life of the sun is still his salvation, and he would perish if a vitality greater than his own did not make the seeds to grow and children to be born to him. He is also dependent upon the light in his own soul for health and happiness, and whether he admits it or not, he still lives in a mystery, and he still has need of hope. To contemplate these greater truths and to experience internally the presence of the eternal are necessary extensions of the consciousness. With all our wisdom and our skill, if grace is not born in our hearts, we are a tired and saddened creation, wandering down through the ages without vision and without purpose. Our ancestors knew this, and they acknowledged it with sincerity and humility. It would be good indeed if we could restore such understanding. We can enrich the old ways and fill them with greater joy and a better hope. But we cannot afford to become cynical and reject convictions which we sorely need. The spirit of Christmas descends to us largely through a group of symbols long associated with the festivals of the season. These symbols may well be termed archetypal, for they reveal the gradual growth of fundamental ideas, subjected constantly to new interpretations. A symbol must always mean what we understand it to mean. It has no substance of itself, and if analyzed or dissected, loses most of its significance. Christmas would be a greater spiritual experience for the average individual if he would make himself receptive to the impact of the legendary and lore surrounding this celebration. Each of the familiar practices has its own gentle and friendly message. It not only gladdens our present festivities, but causes us to share for a moment in the common aspirations of our kind. We would have a better total concept of humanity if we permit ourselves to be quiet and to feel our bond with the ages. This may inspire us not only to cherish the nobler ideas of the past, but to advance them and to find new motives for preserving our priceless heritage of life and of liberty. It makes no difference whether the Christmas symbols originated in Eastern nations or in ancient pre-Christian times. They belong to a universal pattern of gentle remembrances. They tell us that man has always instinctively longed to love the beautiful and to serve the good. Great and noble souls lived, labored, and died ages before the miracle at Bethlehem. There is no ancient good or modern good. There is only goodness itself moving through time. Gratitude is not historical, nor is beauty denominational. Many streams have flown together. Many quaint practices and curious rites have met and mingled. It is good to realize this, for it will help us to broaden our vision, deepen our understanding, and advance such necessary causes as world peace, as well as interreligious friendships. It is really and truly wonderful if some part of our Christmas came from ancient Egypt or India or even remote China. These are regions on a map, but the people who inhabit them are one creation in God and under law. In their hearts and souls, their hopes and their fears are like our own. The fears are ever present, but the hopes we have not yet learned to share. End of part 3, and we'll continue on in part 4. Until then, always remember, love yourselves and love each other unconditionally.